back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Heyo! I am back for the second of my 3 finalist SBFBO review videos, so let's dive straight on in. In my last video, if you haven't seen that, I'd check it out below. That one I told you my 10th, 9th and 8th position books. In this video, we're gonna do 7th, 6th, 5th and 4th position books, and then there'll be another video coming where you can see my top 3. Let's dive in with number 7 in my ranking, The Oath-Sworn Legacy, which is a huge book. You do go on quite a big journey with this book. So, this story, or collection of stories I should say, because it feels like a collection of short stories that gradually build a bigger picture and entice you into the world and get you set up with the characters and what is going on. It feels very different to a lot of the others in this finalist selection because it kind of comes across as a collection of short stories all set in the same world and following the same characters. And the short stories are documenting the adventures of 2 brothers called Balin and Rawley, who is his younger brother, and these 2 are kind of adventurers. They are, men for hire, able to go around the world and fight off monsters and creatures and fantasy beings who shouldn't be there, and basically just go around and save the day. That is their profession. Early on in the sort of short stories or chapters, you realise that they've stumbled into a big world-changing sort of event and situation that has big ramifications for them and the world at large as they go on. So already we're setting up the story with a bigger premise. Now, I will say that I think as you go through the book, it gets much more polished. I think it gets much better. The early chapters, the early stories, feel like early drafts almost. They feel a little bit tarnished, a little bit unrefined. They don't feel like you're really getting to know the characters that well. And it's only probably in the middle section, maybe 30-40%, where I started to kind of get more interested in the characters and what was happening to them because the story opened up and because more and more links were coming through of things that I was like, oh, that's interesting actually. That's kind of weird or wacky. It's also a brutal book, so I'll put that out there. It is not for the faint-hearted. Some of the descriptions in this book were pretty gross at times, and I was like, ooh, viscerally not loving that. But anyway, that's just a warning. So the first few stories really lack depth and characterization, but the middle section and definitely the end section, I feel like you do get to see these 2 brothers and you get to dive into more of their connection to one another and to their devotion for one another and their kind of undying love and desire to help the world at large. They have a tragic backstory, of course, and that motivates them to go out and save the day. But they're also building something bigger. They're trying to build a kind of academy to go up against the magical problem in this world that they encounter early on in the book. So I will say it's certainly one that grew on me. I didn't expect to give it as high a rating as I did in the end because to me it felt like we weren't going to get there. We weren't going to kind of see a really interesting turnaround. And I do think this is a book where that did happen, where me carrying on reading did have a good payoff. And thank goodness for that, because it is a beast of a book. This is a very traditional fantasy. It has a lot of very traditional elements, like dwarves and elves are very traditional here. There's not a lot of new information. It's just the author is taking these developed stereotypes and races and kind of putting them into the story. We do have other monsters as well, some which I'd not really seen much of in other books, but you don't see them, as a forefront character. There are jinn and there are shapeshifters and there are different things in this book that were a little more unusual, a little more untraditional, but I would say that this is more about where do the characters go rather than look at these wacky new characters. They are traditionally embedded in fantasy lore in a lot of ways. One other thing to note about this is that I do feel as though the last third of the book was very dramatic. There's lots of big battles and probably too much battling for my personal taste. I don't mind a battle scene here and there, but this battle scene goes on for quite a long time. There is reason for it. It's kind of world-shattering reason for like big disaster to go on. But I just felt like it was going on and on and on. Now, we do get sort of snippets and dives into our particular characters who we've encountered, and there was a lot to like from some of those characters. I definitely had characters who I got slightly sentimental for as we went through. But having said that, I just feel like some of it was really drawn out at the end. And although there's a lot of action happening, it just feels like there's a lot of action for a long time. And then it kind of ends really dramatically. And I was very sad about the ending. So I'll say that. I won't go into spoilers, but I actually think the ending had a very beautiful, heartfelt moment that really did make me emotional. But there's just a long build up to get there, and it felt long, which is never good. I think for me, this one had a lot of what I like. I like traditional fantasy. I like sort of a big world changing plot. I like characters that develop slowly and you get to really feel for them. So there's a lot I did like, but the bloat on this book, the extra stuff that felt slow, that was still there, and I definitely feel it could have been trimmed down a fair bit. So for me, I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5, which is a 7 out of 10 in the end. A pretty good score, certainly a book that I would recommend to people to try out and read because I did like it. And I'm interested about, like, will there be more? I don't know, because this one feels like it does kind of tie up a lot, but there's also potential here for more to come. So I don't know if it is going to be a series. I don't think it's listed as a series currently, but it's a big standalone, and there is potential for more to come in the future if the author was that way inclined. So we'll see. Maybe there will be more in future. The next one, which was in 6th position for me, was Mushroom Blues, and this one I did not expect to like, so I'm quite pleasantly surprised to see it up here in my ranking. It is a gritty, noir-esque urban fantasy. Not something I usually read for sure, so definitely one that I wasn't expecting to love. And I was surprised, I was pleasantly surprised. And I think the reason I was so surprised and so interested in this book was because of the mushroom factor. Now, Mushroom Blues is a kind of very literal title. There is a mushroom race in this story where people are effectively combined with fungi, which is a little bit of a wild concept, but also really inventive and cool. Especially because I think mushrooms are incredibly awesome. I've read a couple of non-fiction books on mushrooms, and I just think they are so mind-blowingly cool. Like, they have so many abilities to adapt and change and kind of remake themselves. Mushrooms are cool, so I can see why an author would be inspired to do like a race of mushroom people in a book, and I think this one does it well. And in this story, the mushroom people are effectively the lower class caste of society. They're looked down upon, they've been kind of isolated in a lot of ways and cut off from their roots and their heritage, and they're kind of forced into almost like slums together in this world. And we are focusing on a detective character who is called Henrietta, and she is a disgraced detective who's kind of been isolated and sent away to this very remote part of the world after a big incident that happened. And when she gets there, she is forced into a role of investigating these deaths that are occurring to some of the mushroom people. And she also has a new sort of sidekick who's allocated to her. He is one of these people from this race, and they have to work together to uncover what's been going on, what kind of crime and gang related stuff is happening. Now, the storyline for me, it's not my favourite. The setting, not my favourite. The characters were okay, but it was quite a quick read, so it didn't feel like you really got to know them deeply. The mushroom people were for sure the highlight here. I think the world building of them and their culture, really good. Really good on that element. So I didn't like a fair few bits personally, but I was really pleasantly surprised by the way that I kept reading and wanted to read this story, even though a lot of the things traditionally are not my cup of tea. Henrietta, our main character, also has a fear, a deep-rooted fear of the Fungals, this community of mushroom people, and so she, as a character, is quite flawed as the investigator on this, and has to do a lot of sort of internal self-assessment and kind of really searching deep for why she is in this job and whether she really wants to uncover the crimes and help these people, you know, for herself or for them, or she learns a lot along the way, shall we say. And I liked seeing her journey of progression as she goes through the story. I think she's helped a lot by her new friend to uncover what she should really be prioritizing, and there's a lot of soul searching that she does, which I liked seeing kind of her development. I would say it's not the plot that kept me reading here, it's definitely the history, the development, the character kind of growth and lore of the culture that we were following and seeing more of as the story went on. So there is a lot to kind of uncover here, which I liked to see, and I would love to see a story that was more fantasy, more high fantasy, lots of magic with mushroom people at the center of it. So if anyone knows any like mushroomy character-esque stories, not this one, just other ones, I'd be interested, let me know. Strange request for sure, but yeah, mushrooms as a central theme in fantasy, fantastic. Can't go wrong there, can't go wrong. Overall, I liked it more than I expected to, for sure. I definitely felt like it had some lighter moments that I was not super invested in. It didn't feel like it had quite the depth that I normally look for, but it is an urban fantasy and they are usually much faster paced. It's also a kind of noir fantasy, and those are a lot grittier, and I definitely think, you know, for what it was, it did a good job. And if you like that kind of crimey noir fantastical blend, then this is going to fit right perfectly for you. For me, it wasn't quite that. I think people who like sort of the Dresden Files or those kinds of things, you're probably going to really like this. It just wasn't my favourite for those reasons, but the writing was impressive. I really do think the writing is good. I do think that there's a lot of potential with this author for other series from them, and I don't know that this one is my personal thing. I think it's the first in a series. I don't imagine I'll carry on, but I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it. So I did end up giving this a 3.5, which is 7 out of 10 for SBFBO, and I think a lot of you might enjoy this one. The next one, which was number 5 in my ranking, was By a Silver Thread by Rachel Aaron. I really enjoy Rachel Aaron's worlds, and I have to say that kind of as a preface to this review. I've read a lot of her works. I really enjoy them, generally speaking. Like, you can see that there's like some up here. But yeah, I really enjoy her works. I really enjoy her worlds. And this is set in the DFZ world, which I have read other books set in this world. So I am pretty familiar with this world and kind of the way it works and some of the creatures and characters within this world. Now, you don't have to have read any other books set in the DFC whilst you read this one. You can start here, but I think if you have read other books set in this world, you're going to get a lot more out of this than someone who hasn't, because there is a lot of reference to the history of this world, and there's also a lot of reference to the characters that we've had mention of before. We've seen them before. So I do think that this is probably better for readers who've read other work by Rachel Aaron. Having said that, I think anyone would enjoy this series. So this story is a fresh story following a character called Lola, and Lola is a changeling. She was swapped with a human in the human world, and then she was supposed to kind of vanish, because that's what changelings do. But she never vanished, she never went away. Her gossamer, her magic stuck around, and she turned into a monster. And we pick up the story kind of following her as she discovers she's a monster, and then she is offered a deal by a blood mage to kind of help her go back to being human-esque, and in return for making her effectively human, the blood mage will take her as an employee and effectively a slave, and she has to work for them forever. Why would she do this? Because she's desperate to be a human, and she also has a silver thread which is tied to her wrist, a kind of invisible magic one, and that links to her sister, shall we call her, or her human counterpart, who she is determined to save and look after. So she is willing to take this deal to be controlled by this blood mage in order to save her sister and to basically be kind of human-esque for the rest of time. Her storyline feels pretty sad at times because she is controlled by this blood mage, but I think she's still quite a feisty character. She knows her own mind. She's determined to do what whatever she has to kind of make things happen, keep her sister safe. And she has some good friends in this world. She encounters a few other sort of servants of the Blood Mage, and they are all having to work together because although we see her when she's a child and she takes this deal, it then quickly skips forward to her being an adult. And in this time, the Blood Mage has gone missing, and we don't know where he is, but it's a big problem for Lola because if she doesn't see him, she can't survive without his magic. So they're all on this hunt to find out what happened to him and where he is and what's going on. So that's kind of the premise, and obviously there is this element of this silver thread and her connection with her sister running through the story too. Now, I did like Lola as a character. She's easy to get on with, she's easy to enjoy. She doesn't feel like she has quite the depth that I think some of the other Rachel Aaron characters have. Urban fantasy is a faster moving story, and so I don't expect, you know, reams of development and characterization in her books, but I have seen, you know, some characters I personally connect with a lot more in her other books, and I think this one didn't quite have that same level of connection for me. I do like Lola, I think she's fun, but I think the story feels quite fast paced, and I didn't feel like I had that true connection to really get invested all the way through. What I did like about this one is that because it's set in the DFC, which is a magical infused world, we actually learn a bit more about kind of the magic underneath this world. We also learn a little bit more about the fairies and the fairy barrows of this world, because these are things that we've not really touched on in other Rachel Aaron DFC books, and I liked seeing that development. I liked kind of understanding the world a little wider and knowing a bit more about it. We also do meet some fun characters. Tristan the fairy was fun. I also like Simon, who's another blood mage, and we have this kind of Black Rider character who's like this faceless being. Pretty interesting character too. So there were some fun moments with those characters, and I think it's quite light-hearted. It doesn't really take itself too seriously. But for me, unlike some other finalists that I've mentioned in my previous video where the humour didn't work, I think the humour in this one does work. For me personally, I think I find Rachel Aaron's writing to be really enjoyable, and I like what I read when I read her books. I've not found one that I really didn't like so far, so I was expecting good things here, and it certainly delivered. I certainly had a good time with this story. I ended up giving it like a 3.75, so that works out at 7.5 out of 10 for SBFBO, and I certainly recommend Rachel Aaron. This is probably not the start point I would recommend if you want to read more of her series. I'd probably recommend Nice Dragons Finish Last to start with, but I really enjoy all of her books in this world, and I think they're just fun, so I recommend you try her out. The last one I'm going to talk about in this video, and my number 4 out of the finalists, is The Wolf of Witherbell. This one was a real surprise to me. It's actually one I read a long time ago now, like it was one of the first finalists I read, and it stuck with me in some fun ways. There's definitely a lot of magic in this one, which I liked, and this world feels really intricate. It feels as though the author has really thought this through and planned this out meticulously, and there's just a lot of intricacy and detail in the world building, which for me, I enjoy that kind of thing. So when a world feels really developed, that works for me, as long as it's not bogged down in the world building, and in this case I really enjoyed it. I definitely feel like it was a fun story and a fun world to kind of get lost in. So this world is really interesting because it focuses on a world where there are different camps of people effectively, and there's also these big mushroom-like domes that encase a part of the world, and no one knows about them. No one understands where they came from. They know that there's some history there, but they just don't really know what they are, how they're related, all that kind of thing. So there's a lot to discover. We are following a character called Lego, and Lego's life is quite sad to begin with. He has sort of one good friend, and he has an abusive father. He's living a bit of a sad life, but he's doing his best. He's trying to learn. He's trying to understand the world around him. He has an aptitude for learning. He has a will to kind of develop himself and improve and just get knowledge. So he is an interesting character from the get-go, and I did like him and his friend as characters to follow and to get on board with. So there was an instant connection there to the character, which always helps. I also think that he was a character who had a strong friendship, and a friendship is something that I do love to see in fantasy books. I feel like it's not done enough, and when it's done well and when it's authentic, you can really get connected to those characters in a much more visceral way, and I like that. I think that's really fun to draw your reader in by having this relationship that you care about. The domes in this world seem almost impenetrable. No one really knows how to get inside them or what can be done there, but there is a lot of cool stuff when you do get in, and of course, spoiler alert, like they do. I won't say how or when, but people go inside the domes in the story and there are sentient animals, there's like magic, loads of magic in there, there's these mystical masks that we can kind of see on the cover of this book. There's like this mask element and the mask can give you powers. There's strange magic and artifacts and just mind control, all sorts of strange peculiar things that we see and we encounter. I would say this is definitely high fantasy. There's a lot of magic floating around here, and we also get to meet some of the magical creatures and companions in this book, but we do also have a bit of a sad element to some of these creatures. Some of them are forced into roles they do not want, and there is some really sad stuff that happens over the course of the book too. I definitely feel like there's suppression happening here. And at the start of the story where we pick it up, we can kind of see that there will be a war looming. There's these two nations, one who's much more clued up on the magic and one who's much more clued up on the science. And it's a mixture of science and magic in this book. We certainly do see, big telescopes and scientific apparatus being used to analyze and record data of these domes and what could be there, but there's also this heavy magic element running throughout the story. Some other characters that I really enjoyed as we go through the book, Banuk is a character who we meet later on, and I liked him a lot, and just uncovering who he was and how he helped our characters. We also have Alea, and I think there's a real nice element of friendship there. We do have an LGBTQ relationship in this book, bit of a strange one. They were done quite nicely overall, when you put aside the weird bit. So I enjoyed the friendships, I enjoyed the relationship as a whole, and I did enjoy sort of the queer element that's brought into the story. It was nice to see that just seamlessly slotted in. It didn't feel like a big deal, it was just there, and I like that. Overall, I think this story goes through a couple of different tempos. We have some fast moving bits, some slower bits for development, and generally the pacing was good for me. It felt like I was never getting bored because every time it slowed down a bit, it would then pick up a bit too. Apparently this is the first one in a 6-book series, so it's only the beginning, it's only scratching the surface, and it does feel like there's quite a climactic ending to build up for much bigger things to come. Would I carry on reading the series? I think I would. I'm pretty interested to kind of follow what's going to happen next with these characters, and just uncover more of this world. It certainly seems like there's a lot more to come that could be really, really fun, and so I think I would carry on with this series, and I think I'd recommend it to you guys to check it out. I ended up giving this one a 3.75 as well, so again 7.5 out of 10, very solid rating. Very enjoyable world and characters, and certainly one I think a lot of you guys would like as well. So please do let me know in the comments whether you are interested in any of these books, which one appeals most, and I will see you very soon for part 3 where I announce my top 3 finalists. Bye bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.